Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I am Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends, wives, and especially your boyfriends and your husbands. A very warm welcome to Movies TV Mad and a very warm welcome to Monday's edition of the DCU Daily. Will they ever restore the Snyderverse? And should they, in fact, restore the Snyderverse? Hold your thoughts, hold your feelings on that for just a few minutes as I try and explain to you the disconnect between the movie consumer and the people making movies and television today. The most frightening thing about new Hollywood, the people who once were making great decisions, the competent people are no longer making great, competent decisions. That's the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing isn't that the people who are working in Hollywood, right, the modern people working in Hollywood today, shouldn't be in their positions. They shouldn't be running studios. A lot of them shouldn't even be acting in movies or writing movies or even directing movies or even being CEOs of these companies. I'll give you a fine example of this. A few years ago, they made a film called Terminator Dark Fate. What's frightening about this terrible movie is that James Cameron, a genius of a writer-director, was actually involved in the development stage of the story of that movie. That is what's so frightening about new Hollywood today. There's another issue when you look at the disconnect between consumer and modern day Western English speaking entertainment. Yesterday Variety had their TIFF event, and what you see from this TIFF event is all these interviews promoting all these new movies. And one thing's for sure, these fucking people in this industry today talk too much. There's an interview with Jodie Foster where she remembers how there wasn't many women on sets when she was a young actress. Let me explain to you why. But before I do that, who do you think wants to hear you say that, Jodie? All you do is trigger people, trigger your audience. You are a great actress that I've always respected. But listening to you say this shit because it makes Variety happy, because it makes the California nutters in Hollywood happy by you talking about this and it keeps you in work, isn't a good fucking look. Let me explain why there weren't as many women back then on sets and in the industry. Because the role of the female has changed. Back then, most females were housewives. So you wouldn't get so many women working in the industry. Whether you think it was wrong or right for women's roles to be in the home, that's the way society was. But still, if you check the end credits of TV shows and movies back in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, what you'll find is there's around 10% of women involved in entertainment back then. The difference is they deserved to actually be in their positions. What has this got to do with restoring the Snyderverse, Mick? Everything. Everything. As I've said many times, the older Hollywood, the Hollywood of the 60s, 70s, 80s and even the 90s would never have gaslit Zack Snyder. They would never have cancelled his Snyderverse. They would never have cancelled a franchise with so much artistic integrity. Never, ever, ever, because they could see that there's money in it. They would respect the art of it. It's only today, because we've got social media, and social media changed the way they make fucking films. You think Sydney Sweeney would be making any films if it wasn't for the fact that she's very popular on social media because she wears low-cut tops and whores herself out? No! So people are getting work today because of their social media standings. Let that sink in. That's where the industry is today. There is no way the old industry before social media would have killed the Snyderverse. But because of social media, that's why the Snyderverse was gaslit from social media. I still believe that Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios and Disney were putting bots out there to be negative about it because they were so scared of how good the Snyderverse was. So, should the Snyderverse be restored, and will it? Well, you know what I'm going to say. I believe absolutely the Snyderverse should be restored, but will it? Yes, I absolutely believe that the Snyderverse at some point in the next couple of years will be restored. I believe, and I know actually because I've spoken to people, studios outside of Warner Brothers would love to get their hands on the Snyderverse, which is not as easy as it sounds. They see the potential in bringing that back. They see the box office potential in bringing that back. It's only the asses at Warner Brothers who maybe don't see that potential. So I absolutely believe in the next couple of years, the Snyderverse will be restored. I think WB right now find themselves in a very precarious situation where they've broken records. Their past 7 movies have made 40 million plus openings at the box office. Very, very good. If only they weren't hemorrhaging money, right? From their own, stupidity. If they weren't hemorrhaging money, this year would be celebrated at WB. But every time they make money, it's like putting a sticking plaster on a gaping fucking wound. We discussed yesterday how they're going to have to sell everything bit by bit. Warner Brothers will not exist as it is today in 5 years' time. The name Warner Brothers will be swallowed up like the name 20th Century Fox has done. And how sad is that, thinking about the wonderful historical movies that 20th Century Fox made? Old Hollywood is disappearing and being evaporated for many different reasons. And they're not making money from going against what old Hollywood used to do well. So there's no way old Hollywood would have, disavowed the Snyderverse. No way! They were too clever. But these days, because of social media, there was a reaction from WB to give you bright colours and bad gags. A great example of this is this year's Superman film, written and directed by James Gunn. The film is an absolute calamity, an absolute mess. In fact, I applaud Warner Brothers and James Gunn for making over $600 million on a piece of shit. It's an amazing result. He deserves a round of applause. He's made a piece of shit. He convinced the world he was going to give them something special. And, well, not the rest of the world, but domestically, Americans were convinced. This is the same nation who sit there chomping on McDonald's, the most unhealthiest food you can fucking eat. So yes, the Snyderverse will be restored, and it should be restored. Anyone with any logic or sense knows this. So yeah, it will be restored, no question. And the antis and the haters are going to be very angry. How can you let the Snyderverse stand? A toxic fandom win! Keep on fucking crying, because we are going to win. We are going to win this war because we've exposed your Mr. James Gunn for exactly what he is. Now, don't get me wrong. I say every day he's a good, competent writer-director. And he is. I've even enjoyed a lot of his movies. That's not the point. The point being, we're in a situation now where there's no interest in what he's doing. None. As I said yesterday, why do you think that they announced Man of Tomorrow? To try and get someone to watch Peacemaker 2, because its numbers are terrible. Not even in the top 10 boys and girls. What do you make of that? A TV show connected to the Superman movie, straight after Superman, that has very little fucking interest. That tells you everything you need to know. And Hollywood are never more dangerous when they're panicking. Because as soon as things go wrong, they double down on what they're doing. Because they don't like to admit they've made a mistake. Do you remember when John Stankey and AT&T agreed to release the Snyder Cut, and how figures behind the scenes at WB Pictures were doing everything to try and kibosh that situation. All those immoral tactics they were using because they didn't want the world to see how good the Snyder Cut was, because they're the ones who didn't let it happen. And people seeing how good and great that movie was going to be, and was in the end very embarrassing for the people at WB Pictures, and still is to that day. Watching Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut reminded me of something. As a young boy watching the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston and Yul Bremner. Do you remember Yul Bremner? Bald actor, foreign, spoke with a continental accent. What an amazing fucking actor he was, by the way. But he reminded me of the old epics. A 4-hour movie that doesn't feel like a 4-hour movie. In fact, wasn't it interesting hearing people like Nerd Roddick saying they liked the Snyder Cut? I think he's tried to backtrack a little bit on that since Zack upset his little buddy, Jeremy Prime. But you liked it, son, didn't you? Because Zack Snyder isn't the bad, incompetent director you tried to promote he is. Because we know he's not. He's a brilliant director, by the way. And the people, anyone who's ever worked with him, has wonderful things to say about Zack Snyder. So Zack Snyder absolutely wants to restore the Snyderverse. That hasn't changed. He would jump at the chance to make Justice League 2, Justice League 3, and maybe even a Dark Knight Returns adaptation, which he said is the last film. You know, that's the one in his filmography he really wants to make. Maybe he wouldn't want to do Justice League 2 and 3. Maybe he'd just want to do the Dark Knight Returns. I don't know what Zack's thinking. But I think that Zack absolutely would want to finish what he started. And it would be very, very exciting. One thing Zack Snyder does that most, if any, directors working in comic book movies today don't do is get the conversation started. And it's not all toxic. There's a lot of interesting discourse around Zack Snyder. There was a lot of kind of debate around Man of Steel. Should Superman kill? Shouldn't Superman, should Superman kill or should he kill? It was an interesting debate, wasn't it? Same with Batman versus Superman. Should Batman kill or shouldn't he kill? And Zack Snyder creates conversations. Whether they're positive or negative, there's a point of interest. There's no point of interest in what James Gunn's done with this Superman movie. The only thing he's actually done is create the conversation. Well, James Gunn is better than Zack Snyder. No, Zack Snyder is better than James Gunn. I don't want to get involved with those fucking conversations. It's pretty obvious that Zack Snyder is the better director, by the way, as far as I'm concerned. But these, it's like saying my mum's better than your mum. It's so fucking childish and fucking pathetic. We shouldn't be having these arguments. We shouldn't need to have these arguments. There should be a place for a generic DC live-action universe like Gunn's, which is not even that generic. I don't even know how to fucking describe what he's doing. And there should be a place for the Snyderverse. Both things can exist. Why they don't exist shows you exactly where the industry is today. In a really, really dark, incompetent place run by fucking clowns who would rather give you what they want to give you than rather giving you something you're going to fucking enjoy, learn from, cry from, laugh from. They refuse to entertain us. And Zack Snyder was a victim of this very era. Let's not make good artistic movies. Let's make bright colours and bad gag movies, right? Let's make them. It's the bestest thing ever, isn't it? Look at it. Look how bright and inspirational it is. Yeah, man. Yeah. Oh my God, I'm going to come because of the bright colours. That's what they gave us. A load of rubbish. A load of rubbish. All because the MCU was making money, they wanted to copy the MCU. And how did that work out even for for the MCU. So make no mistake, my friends, the Snyderverse will be restored, whether some of you don't want it to or not, and it absolutely should be restored.